Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Dress and Drinks. I'm Leon Wiebers. I am your host of this webinar for the Costume Society of America. And thank you for joining today's webinar series in our ongoing series, Conversations on Dress. And should you have any questions regarding CSA's digital content, please contact Conversations on Dress at costumesocietyamerica.com. And our drink for the evening has just been posted into the chat, the something blue, which sounds so delicious. So hopefully you're shaking your shakers as we speak. I'm really excited tonight to welcome to Dress and Drinks Joshua D. Simon. Joshua is the Assistant Curator of Exhibits and Collections Manager at the Tri-Cities Historical Museum in Grand Haven, Michigan. He graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Fashion Merchandising and Design and Public History with a minor in Museum Studies from Central Michigan University. He earned his Master of Science degrees in Apparel Merchandising and Design with a minor in Women and Gender Studies from Iowa State University, and his research is currently focused on the history of Western fashion, primarily within the 20th century and queer contexts. His research has included references of the Gibson Girl aesthetic during the mid-20th century, former First Lady Betty Ford, and the role of dress in depicting Saint Sebastian as both a Catholic saint and queer icon. He has also conducted research on Cuban-American designer Luis Estevez, British internet personality Jessica Kellegren-Fozard, and the Coast Guard Women's Reserve, also known as the SPARS. It is such a pleasure to have you here, Joshua. Thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for joining us. How are you today?
I'm doing well, yeah. Thank you for having me. It's truly an honor to be here.
So, and such a fantastic shirt of the or the late mid-century that you have going on there, which is awesome.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I'm a big fan of anything 70s polyester, funky patterns. So, why not bring it out for a special occasion like this?
Indeed. So you've got some Kiana going on, is what you're telling us.
Absolutely. And this is a good time of year for it because if you wait a little bit longer, it's going to be a little too hot for it.
Indeed. So, Joshua, please, let's just dive right in and look and see what you have. I'm super excited to see what you have and to share with everyone the conversation and the lovely things that are at the museum.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so like as you had mentioned, I'm here at the Tri-Cities Historical Museum, and our mission is to create connections to Tri-Cities history. So obviously, a big first question is, what are the Tri-Cities, right? So the Tri-Cities are a grouping of three cities in Western Michigan, right along the shore of Lake Michigan. So you can kind of see in the larger map there where we're located within the state. And so specifically, we cover Grand Haven, Spring Lake, as well as Ferrysburg. So
Oh,
they're
cool.
three small towns. Grand Haven is the largest of the three, followed by Spring Lake, and then Ferrysburg is the smallest. We also cover the outlying townships as well, so Grand Haven Charter Township and Spring Lake Charter Township, as well as some of the further outlying areas. So we're really hyper localized. We're truly a local history museum focused on Northwest Ottawa County.
Oh, that's amazing.
Thanks. Yeah. It's very interesting. It's, a lot of my background has been focused on kind of broader, topics related to history. So starting to work here a few years ago had really put me into a place that I hadn't really focused on before.
Hmm.
But it's actually really interesting when you start to dive into the really localized history, you see larger trends being kind of coming out in the smaller sphere as well. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic between the two as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. Awesome.
So we have two separate locations, as many museums do. We have our main museum, which is where we welcome about a little over 20,000 visitors a year, and so you can see that here. It's referred to as the Akeley Building. It was originally a dry goods store. It
Mm.
just had its 150th birthday a few years ago, and we did a big exhibit, celebrating the history of the building. And since then, it's kind of had a lot of different identities. I think it was a toy store at one point. And then the most recent occupant of the building before we took it over was Steckety's, which was a local department store in Western Michigan. So it's really kind of fun. We'll have people come through who still remember as a kid, oh yeah, when it was Steckety's, the kids department was over here and women's was over here and everything. And so our white whale, so to speak, is to try to find any sort of pictures of the interior. We don't have any in the collection currently, and we weren't able to locate any for that big 150 exhibit. So we're really trying to find more historical photos to trace the interior of the building's development. But
Oh wow,
it's
that's amazing.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah, beautiful old building, creaky wood floors, but honestly, it's got a lot of character.
Oh, I love the architecture of it. The windows, the repeating motif of the window shape. It's beautifully painted. It's really lovely building.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And we were really, really lucky to get it because it's right downtown in Grand Haven. It's a Grand Haven is primarily a tourist destination, so real estate tends to be pretty expensive, especially in the downtown area. And so we have such a great location. Really accessible, not too far from the pier, the beach, other local shops, restaurants. It's almost like living or working and living in a postcard almost. I sometimes I'll like walk the pier on my lunch or whatever, and it's
Wow,
honestly surreal, yeah, to be able to do that.
that's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah. So like I said, we're between two sites. So of course, as many museums do, we can't store everything at our actual museum. So we also have our CART building, which is where I'm actually currently at. It's our Community Archive and Research Center. And that's where about probably I'd say 90 to 95% of our artifacts are stored.
Mm.
Our collection, I think we're maybe 50 records shy of hitting 75,000 objects. So it's
Wow.
becoming quite the collection. Yeah, it's quite large, and it's a very diverse history collection. It's I mean almost any sort of thing that you can think of under the sun we probably have. And when I say that, I truly mean that. There's a few interesting things in the collection, and we'll look at a few of those later. But yeah,
Tell
it's a
me
very
more.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of, for instance, one of the things that I pulled recently. We're planning to do an upcoming exhibit about the bicentennial next year, sort of looking back to look ahead. And so, for instance, we have a lot of beer cans actually from 1976 with a lot of the fun bicentennial motifs, which I'm really glad they decided to keep because it's something that would have been so throwaway, but now it's going to be a great kind of treasure of the past to put back on display.
Oh, that's fantastic. I was going to, you answered my first question about, do you collect everything from plows to clothing? And essentially you do. Like, it's awesome that you have beer cans.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, almost anything under the sun that you can think of, we probably have at least one in the collection. It's truly, I mean, one of the most diverse collections that I've had the chance to work in, which is really interesting. But being collections manager, it also presents a lot of challenges because you're not just working with not only different types of fabrics, but also, different types of metals and plastics. And so it's kind of like trying to have a little bit of knowledge on everything to try to best care for these artifacts.
Well, so since you've mentioned the beer can, I now must ask, being a Midwesterner myself, do
Hmm.
you have a crocheted beer can hat in your collection?
Not that I'm aware of. However, we do have a decent amount of FIC textiles that we're still processing through. So I would say that the jury's still out on that one. You never know what you can find, honestly.
Excellent, excellent. Well, if I come across another one, I'll make sure to like share it with you.
Oh, fantastic. Please do. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at currently with everything. But just to give a little bit of kind of organizational history of where we came from. So we were started in 1959 as a small local historical society. It was, a group of passionate, history-minded individuals in the community that really came together. And it's really interesting because they really didn't have an idea of what they wanted to do at first, but they knew they wanted to preserve this history. One of their first tasks actually was celebrating the 125th anniversary of Grand Haven's founding. So Grand Haven was founded 1834. So 1959, they were like, we need to do something to really mark this anniversary. And so the picture in the circle there, that's actually a photo from a dinner that they threw. And they sort of kind of wanted to recreate history. So they looked up recipes from 1834. They had, waiters and waitresses in kind of, period costume or what they were thinking, period for the time, things like that. Um, and yeah, so it was actually really interesting to kind of do. I did a lot of research about this to create a virtual walking tour on Clio, all about this 1959 sort of celebration that they did, because it was really, they were doing little displays all over town. They had the dinner that was held in the hotel downtown, so it was really, really interesting. And then you can see over there on the other side, there's a wonderful picture of when they were marching in the Coast Guard Festival Parade, which we'll talk a little bit more about Coast Guard in a second. But I just thought it was a really, really fun picture from the early 70s, and it's actually interesting too. The two individuals in the back there, they're actually still pretty involved with the organization, and I know them personally, so it's very fun to kind of pick their brain and hear more about the organizational history and everything like that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I love that you mentioned Clio because we had them on our webinar last month. As you're talking, like, share more about how you've used that because it's such a great tool for collections and historical sites all over, and it's free. So it was a really wonderful thing when I learned about it just recently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I had first become familiar with it when I was in grad school, and I knew, I was like, this is a cool tool, but I had never had a chance to use it. And when I was doing this research about what they were doing in 1959, I kept coming across, we had a few, not all, but we had a few photos of these like window front displays that they would do, and they were all themed to different types of history. So like one focused on like Dutch immigration to the area, one focused on the history of the women's club, one focused on the history of like kids and toys, and a bunch of different things. And I was like, how this is such a geographic thing, even though it's pretty condensed to downtown Grand Haven. I mean, it was all over downtown. And so I remembered Clio, and so that's where I was like, I think this actually might work really well. And so we were able to create this wonderful, self-guided walking tour that's supplemented with some of these images, such as like the one that you see in the circle there, and a bunch of other ones. And then I was able to find good descriptions of kind of what was in the window displays. And the really cool thing is actually some of the artifacts that were displayed in those window displays ended up in our collection. So it was kind of fun to piece everything together and be like, oh, this is Ruby Barrett's dollhouse that was in this window during 1959, and now here's a contemporary picture of it in our collection, things like
Oh
that.
my gosh, that's amazing. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely. It's truly a really cool tool, and I'm hoping that we're able to kind of continue using it further for some other projects.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So a little bit more just kind of history. So they started, in 1959, and they were only a historical society, no physical museum space until 1962. In 1962, they started the museum, which the museum at that point was actually, I believe they rented two rooms in the upper floor of a former Masonic lodge, and that was where they were sort of storing artifacts, not really doing too much display. But that changed about 10 years later in the early 70s. They actually moved into the building that you see here. And so this is an old train depot, actually, that's right downtown, right on the waterfront. And so it was interesting to kind of retrofit this train depot. They knew they didn't want it to be torn down. It was always a landmark of downtown Grand Haven. And so that was our home for a very, very long time. We were in that space technically. So we moved into the Akeley building in 2004, and then they had both the depot and the Akeley building until about the late 2000s, and then they ended up returning the depot to the city. And thankfully, the depot is still there. It has been repurposed, and now it's a few different shops and things like that. But it is kind of, it's actually funny. Every once in a while, we'll get somebody who will call and who'll say, hey, is the address, this, and then it's the depot address. And we're like, no, we moved about 20 or so years ago. So now we're on Washington, but a lot of people remember the depot, and it's always fun. We don't have a ton, but we have a few photos of the exhibits from like the 80s and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see how they kind of retrofitted the space, and what artifacts, what topics they wanted to highlight, things like that.
Oh, nice. Interesting. What a great
Yeah.
building.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, it's beautiful. It's a really beautiful building. I pulled this one just because it's an older photo from around the time they would have moved in, but it's got gorgeous brickwork and architecture. It's got these I'm not sure the exact term for it, but kind of uh, sort of supports for the roof line. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
nice. And it's actually right in front of the musical fountain, which is one of Grand Haven's other claims to fame. It's sort of the like largest musical fountain in the world, and so people come from all over the place to see this musical fountain.
Oh,
It
that's
lights up
amazing.
colors and things like that. So it's really really cool if you know if you ever have a chance to look it up. So. Um, like I said, Coast Guard fervor is really, really important to the community here. We were essentially known de facto as Coast Guard City, USA, for decades throughout the 20th century, and I believe it's now in the late 90s. It was officially written into law as yes, like there's a proclamation, Grand Haven is Coast Guard City. And it really dates back about 100 or so years. There was a ship called the Escanaba that was a Coast Guard cutter. It was built in Bay City, Michigan, and it was built in the early 30s, and then it was stationed here in Grand Haven. So it would go out and do things like rescues, ice breaking, things like that. And so, you know, everybody in town knew the ship, you know, was maybe knew somebody who served on it, things like that. Then, of course, as we know, you know, we get into the 40s, and then all of a sudden the war effort starts, and so a lot of ships like that were called to essentially help out. The Escanaba was actually sailing in the North Atlantic, and then it was, they're not exactly sure what happened, but essentially it was either torpedoed, there was an explosion, something. But unfortunately, it sank, and all but two were lost. Many people were lost. But because of that, you know, it was really hit the community of Grand Haven hard. So they banded together because their idea was that, you know, we are going to replace the Escanaba. We are going to buy and sell enough bonds to make enough money to rebuild another Coast Guard cutter and name it Escanaba 2. And they did it. And the crazy thing is, I was going to say, don't quote me on this, but if I'm remembering correctly, I want to say it was like $3 million or something insane like expensive
Wow.
considering, you know, 1940s, you know, conversion of currency. It was a ton of money, and especially for a small town of this size to be able to do it, I mean, it was just really incredible. And then honestly, since then, it just never really went away. They started having a kind of a de facto Coast Guard festival. It technically celebrated its 100th birthday last year, but it began as sort of like a picnic, and then it was sort of this like water fete, and then it really became cemented as a festival around the 1940, late 40s, early 50s. And now it goes on till this day, and it attracts, oh gosh, I want to say, again, don't quote me on these exact numbers, but I want to say it's like 300,000 people come to the area just for this short span of about a week or two to celebrate the Coast Guard. So lots of events, ships coming through the harbor, Coast Guard
Wow.
dignitaries. I believe Commandant Linda Fagan was here last year. So
Wow.
it's very. I believe it's technically the largest celebration of a military organization in at least in the United States. So it's quite interesting that, you know, it's of all things, you know, specifically the Coast Guard, but you know, this community. It's actually really one of the things I thought I find really interesting is that when Coast Guard festival season happens, everybody decorates their house as if it's Christmas, but they decorate with Coast Guard flags and things like that. So it's interesting. There's almost like two house decorating seasons around here. So just kind of fun.
Okay, so when does this happen again? What time of year?
It's usually it kind of changes every year. It's usually late July into early August, but it always overlaps with August 4th, specifically because August 4th of 1790 is when the Coast Guard was founded. And so originally it was just this one day event on August 4th, but now they want to make sure it always encompasses that date to essentially celebrate that anniversary of founding the Coast Guard.
That's fantastic. It sounds like San Diego's Fleet Week, only different.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Probably a lot of similarities.
Yeah. Oh my God, that sounds fantastic. That's amazing.
Yeah. So with that, one of the things I wanted to talk about now to kind of parlay into more textile specific things is actually the Miss Coast Guard pageant. So for a lot of years, it
You
not
are
anymore.
kidding me. You are
I
kidding
know.
me.
I actually did not know about this thing until I started working here, and then the more and more I got into it, I was like, this is actually wild that this existed. We don't know when it started exactly. There's sort of different records saying different things, but we know for a fact that they were doing it at least by the late 1930s, and then it went all the way until 2005. And so we are very fortunate to have actually three gowns connected to Coast Guard queens in our collection. So this one is
Yeah.
probably one of my favorite pieces in the collection. This is, you can see her wearing the gown here, worn by Queen Beverly Simmons, who was the queen in 1976, which is a landmark year, of course, as we know. And so there's this beautiful shot here. She's in front of the one of the Coast Guard ships that was stationed in Grand Haven at the time. And it's just a fantastic, fantastic dress. You can see another a formal portrait. They took formal portraits of them. They got crowns, they got sashes, things like that. And so you
Oh,
can see a
that eyelet
full
blouse. Kill me. That is just amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's actually two pieces. It's a yeah blouse and then a sort of a skirt with like a it's almost like a pinafore type of thing.
Yes.
And it was really really fun. We actually just had this on exhibit last year for our Coast Guard Festival 100th anniversary exhibition. So it's a really really beautiful piece. We're sort of debating with the bicentennial because it had so much light exposure and exhibition time. We're probably going to use a photo repro, but again, it's such a cool piece, and is really evocative of its time period. And so don't get me wrong. I mean, all of the gowns are cool, but again, this one is just so iconic.
That's
Really.
amazing. Okay, so I have to ask, what
Mhm.
is going I mean, first of all, that collar, you're just killing me here.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
I mean, that is a collar spread right there. That's amazing.
Yep.
Um, what is going on with those sleeves? Is that lace at the bottom? Does it come down and then to sort of like a pagoda lace sleeve with another cuff? What is
Yeah, it's like really weird. There's like so yeah, it comes down and then there's a seam like right about here and then
Yeah.
it's lace and it's see-through. So you can sort of see it. Let me see if I can
Oh,
look at
that's amazing.
you can sort of see a little bit in the photo
Oh,
and she's
yes, I
you can see
see.
her
Yes.
through
Yes.
that
Okay.
area. And so unfortunately, because this, I was just stuffing it with tissue to kind of hold the shape
Of
out
course,
or
yeah.
whatever, so it doesn't translate as well. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I don't know what the purpose or design
Did you
function
make
of
this
that was.
yourself? Does this like do you know who made this? Like who designed this? What do you know any of that information? That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, I want to say because they were different. They were different manufacturers. The blouse was from a brand called Joy Anna or Anna Joyana that I hadn't heard of before. And unfortunately, we didn't have a chance to kind of look into it a little bit further. And then the dress itself was actually created by from what I can tell, more of like a localized company, but not here. I want to say it was like something it was like Walker Mountain Crafts, and it was based out of somewhere maybe in like West Virginia, Tennessee, Smoky Mountains area. I'd have to look up the specific one, or specific name, but yeah, it was interesting. It was kind of two pieces or two brands or companies or organizations I had never really heard of before.
Oh,
um,
fantastic.
but yeah, so that's one of the ones that we have. So another one is this one. This is from Sherry, who was crowned queen in 1983. This one, I believe, is Mike Benet formals, and so it's really really beautiful. It's got this really nice beading right under the bust, really nice rhinestone straps and everything. It's also got a scarf with it as well. But I haven't found any photos of her actually wearing the scarf, so we didn't end
Hmm,
up. We photographed it both with and without the scarf, just to kind of
right,
have
right.
dichotomy there. But pretty standard dress,
Yeah.
formal dress, but still a very cool provenance and everything. And so the interesting thing about Sherry is actually we have two of her dresses, right? So they essentially when they were queen, they were queens for the whole year, crowned in '83, and then all the way until the following '84 festival. And 1984 was actually a very special year because that would have marked the 150th anniversary of Grand Haven's founding. So we actually have a second gown of hers. I titled this one, 1984 to 1834, and this was actually a very interesting research project for us. My supervisor and I, she's the curator of exhibits. We were trying to figure out this dress because we knew it just was just described in the paperwork as her gown and a Coast Guard queen gown. But we saw that she was wearing the other one in her formal portrait. So we were like, why was she wearing this? And even though it sort of got some elements of the 80s going on, we were like, this just seems off. It seems weird. And you can sort of tell it's made, well, but it's not lined. It seems homemade. There's no label, that type of thing. And so we kept going and digging further and further and further, and we finally found in the microfilm a very, very grainy picture, but we were actually able to make her out wearing this dress at a specifically a oh gosh, I can't pronounce it very well, but sesquicentennial celebration, so 150th celebration. I'm assuming the idea, we couldn't find much more information, but the idea was essentially to kind of dress up in period dress, and recreate the 1834 fashion mode type of thing. But yeah, it's a very, very fun piece and a very of its time piece. So
Oh,
it was
that's
fun.
fantastic. That is just fantastic.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. And it was a very interesting mounting challenge because the with the wide neckline, we had to find a dress form small enough waist wise, but then because of that the shoulders weren't broad, so they kept falling off, especially with the weight of the sleeves. So we had to kind of pretty ingenuitively do some pinning, but not pinning through the fabric and everything to make it stay on. But I think it was worth it because it's just a really, really fun piece. That's kind of the Miss Coast Guard pageant. Unfortunately, we don't really have a ton of other artifacts, like specifically three-dimensional things, but we have so many photos of. I mean, we have photos pretty much from almost every year, and we have programs. We actually have now, because of this really large donation that we received. We originally estimated it at about 3,000 pieces. Now we're thinking it's closer to 4,000. It was a donation essentially of the entirety of the archives of the Coast Guard Festival organization.
Wow.
We have a lot behind the scenes of like when they were planning the pageants, of the programs, of like the order of like do this, this, this. So it's got a lot of research potential about how what these pageants meant, how they were put together, things like that. And we're really just kind of on the surface of understanding, this sort of cultural thing that was around for, I mean, the better part of probably about 75 years or so.
Well, this is either a documentary or a Coen Brothers film. I'm not quite sure which one it is.
Perhaps both. Who's
Or
to say?
both. Indeed, indeed.
Yes, yes. And so, of course, Coast Guard fervor is not just limited to even the festival or Miss Coast Guard. It's really anything to do with Coast Guard. And so, because of that, one of the things that I really wanted to talk about was this exhibit that we actually just took down in February. Shipshape Sisters with the women of the Coast Guard spars. So that was the first full-scale exhibit that I curated. And it was really, really fun. Anybody who has been in CSA for a few years may remember, I believe I gave it at a Midwest conference, but I had actually done research about the spars before. And it was a topic that I could just never let go. It was just so fascinating to me, right? So the spars were the Coast Guard Women's Reserve, and they were established in 1942, a direct response to the war effort, right? They didn't have enough people to do the jobs that the Coast Guard needed to do at that point. And so they set it up. They said, you know what, we're going to the idea or the concept was that we will, we will create a women's reserve, have women come in. They will essentially take over, jobs on domestic bases. And then the idea was that it would essentially, quote unquote, release a man for sea service. So the spars did everything. I mean, most of them were, in some sort of clerical yeoman capacity, but a lot, some of them were photographers, some of them were cooks and bakers, some of them rigged parachutes, drove jeeps and trucks. And it was a really, really, from what I can tell, all of the readings, reading of period material, accounts from after, oral histories. Most of the women, I mean, it was a huge impact on their life, even though the organization, really, a lot of them only served for, 2, 3, 4 years and then were discharged after the war.
Right.
So it's a really fascinating, topic to kind of dive into. And so with it, I just kind of wanted to kind of go through and kind of look at some just exhibit photos and some of the specific ensembles and garments that we included, just because the exhibit's not up anymore for anyone to view.
And
Um,
what a great title.
Oh yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah. I really like when I was doing this, I was like, I want everything to be really grounded in the material because it was the hardest thing, as any historian knows, is being able to pick from all of these great sources. But one of the things that really kept emerging was, they talked about, they wanted to be in ship shape, they kept their rooms in ship shape, they kept their uniform appearance ship shape. So I said, perfect, And the really fun thing is actually in that photo in the center there of the two ladies, the black and white photo, those are actual sisters that served in the spars together. Yes, yes, yeah. So I was like, well, there we go. There is actual, of course, the sisterhood of serving together, but there really were sisters that truly did serve together. So just a really interesting group of people to study.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. So here you can see our kind of opening vignette. This was a double-sided case that we did. And it was really about sort of comparing and contrasting sort of this pre-war, ready to go image, and then the okay, I'm ready. I'm in my uniform. I'm ready to go. There was a great recruitment video that I sort of was inspired by because it's basically a bunch of women in their standard civilian skirt suits, and then they do one of those kind of cheesy 1940s cuts where they all snap their heads, and then all of a sudden, bam, they're all in their uniforms and they're marching in formation, and it's sort of you can be a spar too. And so I said, okay, we can't actually make that snap happen, but maybe we can kind of do that with the dichotomy of the two ensembles. And so it was fun because then we were able to pull an ensemble. This is actually one from my own collection because we didn't have anything in the collection that was just the right time period. And actually, even this one, my theory is that it's a little bit late because I actually had to hike the skirt up pretty high to kind of get it to be knee length. So I'm thinking it's probably from the later 40s, but it still sort of was giving the vibe of what we were looking for. And then we had this fantastic piece in the collection from one of our local spars, Spar Recruit. And so these were armbands. There's a really fantastic photo of a bunch of spar recruits in a row, and they have their suitcases and they're all holding their armbands out, ready to go. And so it's such a cool piece, and I had actually never seen it before until I started working here, and I've only actually seen one other, so I don't think many of these survived. But it's really nice. It's actually like a satin with some like the spar recruit is in like a navy blue velvet, and it's just a really interesting sort of textile ephemera piece that I don't think many spars probably kept, but still really fun.
Is it Velcro on the end, or how does it close?
It appears that there was some sort of adhesive applied to it that
Oh,
is
okay.
completely dried up now. But yeah, there's no way. We actually, it was a very interesting way because we were like, we're not putting any holes through this. So we had to basically take it, wrap it around the sleeve, and then we took Mylar and created sort of like a V shape that was longer than it. And then we pinned because since it was from my collection, I didn't mind as much if we had pinned through the actual fabric of the sleeve. So we pinned through that, so that way there was nothing actually, there's no pins through the actual Spar Recruit artifact, but it was able to hold it on and hold it up for the duration of the exhibit. So we were trying to figure out, we're like, we can't use any adhesives, we don't want to pin through this thing, what are we going to do here? And so that was another kind of interesting mounting challenge that we were able to figure out.
Yeah. Wow, that's
Yeah.
amazing.
So the other ensemble is that was in the case was this uniform. And so a fun fact about the Spar uniforms, everybody knows about the Wave uniforms. They were designed by Mainbochet or Mainbacher, depending on how you pronounce it. But actually, the Spars wore the exact same uniform, and it's really interesting to kind of like read a little bit more of that sort of fashion history, sort of designer context of it. But that was actually one of the details that they really focused on in promotional efforts was rank, pay, all of that stuff, but you get to wear a designer uniform. That they really tried to recruit people with that fact. And this uniform actually is really interesting because this one, so This was probably one of my favorite things that emerged from all of this research and everything. I traveled down to Purdue to look at papers in their archive as part of the Dorothy Stratton collection. Dorothy was the commander or director of the spars during the war. And so in her papers was a first 6 months progress report, because this uniform really was questionable to me because it's got actually got a Navy tag in it, and every other spar uniform I had seen had a Coast Guard tag. But we knew based on the provenance of who owned it and looking at her military records, she was not a wave, she was a spar. So I was like, did they just mess up? Did she just buy another uniform? But in that progress report, they actually outlined that from December of 42 until May of 43, the Navy was actually producing the uniforms, and then after that first 6 months period, they switched over to Coast Guard. So it's actually really cool because now we know, based on her service records plus that information, that we can date this specific uniform between January and May of 1943. Which, I mean,
Wow.
how, besides a specific event, how, most of the time you never get that specific with garments. So that was a really, fun discovery for us.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Great label too.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So let's see. Another uniform to kind of talk about. So the one we were looking at before was the sort of it was sort of the dress uniform, but it was also used as the winter working uniform. And so what we're seeing here is our display of the summer uniform, actually. And this was another sort of interesting, ingenuitive display thing we had to do. So this is actually a closet. So what we did was we took the doors off of this. And so we kind of made it as like a recessed case. And then we had a volunteer who was really incredible with woodworking. And he was actually able to make this frame that fit with screws into the door frame. And so we were able to actually use that as an additional sort of case space. And I think it turned out really well with the photo behind it, and then the uniforms in front and everything. But this uniform
That's
is
great.
oh yeah, it's a really it's really really beautiful. It's so you can see it in the center there with the jacket, then without, and then a little bit of a close up on the seersucker there. But yeah, it's made of a seersucker, and then they would. It's interesting. There's a lot of photos. I've seen a lot of photos in. They served in the continental United States, and then as the war progressed, they allowed them to serve not overseas but in the territories of Hawaii and Alaska. And so a lot of the Hawaii photos, I mean, pretty much almost every
Oh,
spar is wearing this uniform. There's a lot of I think there's some photos of parades after the war ended where there's units of them marching in this uniform, and it's really interesting too to kind of look at something like this, just to it's really almost there's elements of it that are still could be fashionable today, and but it's still really really pretty old,
yeah,
but
it's really lovely. It's really great. Oh my
so
God.
I just put in a few other photos just to kind of give an idea of kind of what the exhibit was looking like. The one over here on the left was just a fun graphic design project that I was really proud of because it was just such a beautiful graphic, and so we were trying to figure out some wayfinding signage, and so we said let's incorporate the graphic. And then you can see there from the other photos. So on the left-hand side, one of the main focuses or foci were the fact that, since we are so tied to local history, being just sort of on the topic of Coast Guard, it sort of felt localized, but we really wanted to make it hyper local. So we sort of created a SPAR Hall of Fame. And so those are all of the women that were from the area, actually, that were SPARs that
Mm.
either actually born in Grand Haven or that lived in Grand Haven later in their life. And then in the corner there, you can actually see the next kind of textile uniform that we're going to be looking at, which was the athletic suit here. So this was their sportswear. It consisted of a romper and an overskirt. And there's a lot of really interesting photos of them doing calisthenics in this. I ended up finding some photos of them climbing over those big kind of rope things that are like 20 feet tall. Those,
Oh yeah.
and things. They're wearing this, without the overskirt. They were allowed to take the overskirt off for that. Although it's interesting too, because in some of the period documents, they'll say, make sure you wear your overskirt when you're walking to or from the base. And one of the really, really fascinating things that we have in our collection that I haven't found anywhere else, even in travels to the Purdue Archives, to the Coast Guard Academy, all of those places, we actually have a permission slip for this uniform. So apparently, I don't know if everybody had to get one, but at least some of the spars had to have a signed permission slip to wear this uniform, which is kind of crazy. Again, looking at it from a contemporary lens, it seems fairly modest, but at the time it was apparently somebody thought it was necessary, I guess, to have a permission slip for something like this.
Who's showing so much leg.
So much, apparently, yeah. Right. So yeah, so just another really kind of a fun piece, and it was always interesting to hear some of the comments of people that would go through the exhibit. I would never work out in that. Maybe I'd wear that to the beach or something, but I wouldn't work out in that. And I'm like, you and me both. I don't blame you, honestly. Oh, yeah, but so there's just kind of a good kind of sweeping panoramic of the exhibit. You can sort of see
Very
one
nice.
of the other things that we did to sort of bring in those local ties. You can see part of it is we created this 8x10 floor vinyl map of Michigan. One of the things is, even though we really focused on our 10 spars that were localized, I wanted to expand because I knew there were so many people from Michigan that served. And so we definitely didn't find everybody, but I think we found pretty close to like 50 spars who lived in
Oh,
Michigan, at the time of enlistment when the war started. And so then we included their full name, their service dates, their life dates, as well as their rank when they were discharged. And so we put that kind of geographically as sort of like a passive interactive, so that way people could see, oh, cool, there was a spar that was from the town that I was from. And we even ended up finding some from the Upper Peninsula, which is really interesting, because I was hoping that we would be able to, but I think a lot of Michiganders would agree that the Upper Peninsula tends to get forgotten about, and so I was glad that we were able to kind of incorporate some of the women that served from there as well.
nice, nice. This looks like a really lovely exhibit.
Thank you. Yeah, it was really fun. I really my main goal, of course, was telling the story, but was really doing justice to these women, right? And I wanted it to appear, what I got from the materials was that it really felt impactful. They felt like they were part of something larger than themselves, and so I said this exhibit, scale wise, needs to be larger than life. And so how do you, when the artifacts are small, how do you make it feel larger than life? And so that's when we pulled in a lot of those oversized wall images and
Hmm.
things like that. So then we kept going. So the exhibit really focused on sort of three different themes, right? It was sort of this recruited, idealized experience. How did they portray it to get people to come? A more of a realistic experience, and that was kind of done through more personalized letters written home, scrapbooks, things like that. Photos of them making funny faces and being at intimate parties at houses, just of that they were real people too. And then the last theme was actually focused on sort of the post-war spars and the sort of the organization, and as well as sort of how it was remembered after the organization was dissolved. So it was started in 42, and then it was disbanded in the late 40s, but only for about a year. They reinstated it in I want to say 49. And then it was significantly smaller, but it was in or around from 1949 until 73. 73 was when women were allowed to join the larger active duty. There didn't need to be essentially a separate women's reserve with changes in legislation. So the uniform on the blue uniform over there, that is a post World War II uniform.
Hmm.
We were able to date it, not more specific than this, but we found some documents and images, so we think it's from between 1959 and 1973. And so you can see it's a pretty stark difference, in kind of uniform changes. But it's still interesting to see how it continued on. And then the other piece over here, actually, this is a scarf. This was owned by a spar who she was really integral. Her name was Eleanor Fabian, and she was integral into. She really felt like after the spars disbanded, it was really important for that story to be told. And so she really pushed for and organized spars to come to the Coast Guard Festival to march in the parade. And so this is actually her scarf. And it's really fun because it's also a Frankie Welch scarf, who's somebody who's sort of tangentially come up for me a little bit. And so when I saw that, as part of the donation, I was like, oh, this is not only cool for its local provenance and its connections to Eleanor, but also being, a Coast Guard specific scarf, but also a Frankie Welch scarf. So it was a really fun piece. It was actually just donated this past summer, right before the exhibit opened. So it came in just in time to be shown off.
That's great. That's a beautiful scarf.
Yeah, absolutely. And she wore it. It was not, of course, standard issue, but she wore it as part of. She actually Eleanor's still in. They marched every other year in the 1990s, and so she still fit into her original spar uniform from the 40s. So she wore the uniform as was, but she swapped out the scarf for that one. And yeah, what a lady! It's fun to look at photos of her wearing it and everything. Um, so one other thing that I kind of just wanted to touch on is more local connections, right? So one really fun thing is the photo of the group of women that are raising their hand. They're actually being sworn in a park that's right downtown in Grand Haven. And the idea was they wanted to essentially provide, Grand Haven wanted to provide a spar for every single man that was lost on the Escanaba. So as part of the festival that year and as part of the memorial program, they had this swearing in ceremony. And so yeah, seven local women actually were sworn in, and yeah, so it was right down the street from us, which was really fun. And then on the other image, actually, so this is a photo of the 1939 Miss Coast Guard court. And at center there is Jessie Olson. She's the one holding on to the life preserver. So she was Miss Coast Guard 1939, but she went on later to serve as a spar. And she's from Grand Haven. So a really, interesting individual that kind of really pulled a lot of the stuff we had going on together, which was really fun.
That's amazing. That's such a great story.
Yeah, absolutely. What one other thing, kind of just a quick touch on about the ship-shaped sisters, and then I want to just talk about weddings really quick. It was such, I think the biggest impact moment actually is that picture on of the girls looking at the exhibit. I wasn't there that day, but our education curator was taking some students through there, and she said that some of the comments from it were that they said things like, I didn't realize that women could be in the Coast Guard. I didn't realize women were in the Coast Guard that long ago. I want to join the Coast Guard someday. And it was just really like a kind of fun full circle moment of like, this is why we study this history, to show people what's possible and to show people what's happened. So it was a really, I mean, touching moment for me, to hear that people were really enjoying it and it was making
Nice.
that impact. So that was really fun.
So
Um,
wedding dresses.
yes, absolutely. Yes. So this one, I'm gonna hold my cards a little bit more because this one is still under development, and this one will actually be opening in May. So if you're in the West Michigan area, within the next few months, you'll be able to see this one. But as you can see, so old, new, borrowed, blue weddings in the Tri Cities. This is all about hyper localized weddings, right? We have a great collection, as many museums do, of wedding gowns, and so we want to show that off. But not only just gowns, other things as well, but primarily from the gowns. And so the one wedding that I really want to highlight here is sort of the central wedding to this whole thing. The exhibit will essentially be focused. It will be the idea is that there'll be a central wheel in the middle of the gallery, and each wheel will sort of showcase a different aspect of wedding culture, right? And the reason we're doing this is because there's this one wedding that was happened on September 3rd, 1891, where we have so many things from this wedding. We have the
Wow.
wedding dress, we have the wedding shoes, we have the wedding gloves, we do not have the wedding tux, but we actually have a tux from the groom from later in his life. We have the invitation, we have a photo of the bride, and we have one special thing that I will show off later that is a pretty unique claim for us. Um, so this wedding was the Savage Robbins wedding. So this was when Esther married Nat Robbins. And so you can see the wedding gown here. The very, very sad part, the reason I'm highlighting this dress in particular is of all the artifacts in that wedding, this will be the one thing that will not be going on display. And the
Oh,
sad reason for that is it is shattering
oh
very, very
no.
quickly.
Yeah.
We toiled over if it made sense to sort of kind of, we need to preserve it at its best, but it's important to be accessible to the community. And ultimately we decided that, we're hoping, potentially maybe some conservation developments will happen, or we'll be able to do something to stabilize it. But either way, we want to preserve it as long as we can for at least research purposes in case anybody in the community wants to see it. So what we did was we had a professional photographer come in, we dressed it, and we had a really, really nice photo taken of it. And so we're going to actually use a big kind of blow up in the exhibit, and then that's going to be an opportunity to talk about, kind of some museum preservation things, educate sort of, the layperson about shattering silk, things like that. But
Yeah.
it hurts my heart because it's a beautiful gown, and it really would kind of take everything full circle. But it's the balance, so
It's
it
the
is what it
balance.
is.
Always is. Yes, especially with fragile silk things.
Absolutely. Um, So the one fun thing that I hadn't shared quite yet is this. So this is the last thing from the wedding we have. We have the wedding cake. Yes, you heard me correctly. That is a wedding cake from 1891. And we again, don't call Guinness up quite yet, but we believe from our research that this is actually the world's oldest preserved wedding cake. The oldest example we can find is from either 1897 or 98. So this one being from 1891 predates that, by a few years. But yeah, it is, I would argue, probably our most unique and most treasured artifact. And while it's no textile, I find it completely fascinating. I had never seen, cake that old before. I don't think many people have, if anybody. So it's such a cool thing, and that will be going on display. That piece actually is fairly stable. It's a very interesting preservation, you know, conundrum, because not many, if any, people have food in their collections, and if they do have food, it's usually special exceptions. And so it's been a very interesting kind of, we're always trying to figure out like how do we best care for this thing. But thankfully, honestly, it's pretty stable. It's an alcohol fruit cake. And our curator of collection, his theory is essentially that over the years, all of the sugar just sort of crystallized and sort of froze it in time. But I did find an article when I was doing a lot of that 1959 research for those storefront displays. This was actually one of the items that was, displayed and then later donated. And the son of the couple that got married was quoted in an article, and he had said that he poured brandy, like a bottle of brandy, over the cake once a year. Obviously, we do not do that, and we've had this in our collection since I believe it's mid 1970s. I want to say 74. So it really has had nothing done to it since then. But it essentially has been stable. I mean, we really haven't noticed any sort of degradation. So yeah, so it's a really, really fun, unique claim to fame.
Wow. It's a drunk cake that it's not going anywhere. If it's had a bottle of brandy poured over it every year, like it's got some time yet.
Oh yes, absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely, yeah. So,
it's
and it'll be
absolutely
really, really fun
beautiful. The
to.
decorations, are those like baked little pieces that are on it, or are they like little pieces of bread, or what is that the
I
frosting? Like
I
what is that?
We're pretty sure it's the frosting, actually. We think it's like frosting, and then there's also there's pieces of wheat on it. There's like honeycombs on it. There's like even like little what look like maybe flowers or flower petals. Again, we're not sure, and honestly, it would be really fun to send this piece out for some sort of chemical testing that we don't have the capacity to do. But yeah, we really don't know. It's sort of a little bit of everything, and it's a really fun piece because we usually keep it. It was donated in this tin, and we haven't ever tried to pull it out of the tin. We're very nervous that if we do anything with it, it'll potentially crumble. So we leave it in the tin. We keep the tin lid on top of it, and we keep it out. Kind of its home location is sort of an on display piece for tours, and so it's really fun when school kids come through and they're like, do you guys want to see the world's oldest wedding cake? We pull it up and they're like, what? And then they're like, that's nasty. That's so crazy. Why do you have that? It actually doesn't smell as bad, like super bad, honestly, though. It smells like a little musty, but you would expect it because everyone's like, oh, is it going to smell gross when you take the lid off? No, no, it honestly, it's pretty, it seems pretty stable and not too bad. So but the kids really, they love to get a kick out of it. They think it's just so cool and they've never seen anything like it.
That's amazing. Um, so there are a couple of comments. So one, Meg says, speaking as a costume conservator, thank you for taking the long view about Esther's wedding dress.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Yeah, we it was one of those things where we were kind of going back and forth and we were like, like we were just, I guess we're sort of just hoping for a kind of Hail Mary that maybe, in 100 years there'll be some sort of chemical development and then they'll be able to do something and stabilize it. But we really want to make sure that, if we can, we want to keep it around as long as possible.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and I'm glad to hear that it's the decision supported.
Well, if you decide that you want to take a pattern off of it and have it duplicated, I know people who can do that for you.
Oh, I mean, and hey, that would be fantastic because, that's the thing is maybe creating a recreation of it would be one of the ways to make it a lot more accessible,
Yeah.
to show it off or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And then Allie has asked, is the cake sealed? But apparently not.
No, yeah, no, it's not. It's just like a tin lid that just fits over. It's got like a little bit of it. I don't even want to say it snaps on, but it's
Yeah, it's like a
tight,
cookie
but I
tin.
doubt it's
Yeah.
air sealed at
Yeah.
all.
So, Joshua, this was fantastic. This is the first food we've had on Dress and Drink, so thank you very much.
Oh yeah.
But really, really delightful and really wonderful and great to learn about the spars. I did not know about them at all as a women's auxiliary to the Coast Guard, which is really fantastic. Thank you so much. You have a great collection. It is just really lovely to see. And so it's just been lovely having you here. And now you are also on my list of things. As I've said before, I'm going on sabbatical from my gig here at LMU next year, and I will have to like swing through the Tri-Cities and check out what you have. So
Oh, please,
um,
by all means. Yeah, if anyone's in the area, let me know, and I'm happy to give a tour.
thank you so much, Joshua. It's been really a pleasure to have you. Please follow the Costume Society of America on Facebook and Instagram to make sure you hear about all of our upcoming episodes of Conversations on Dress. And lastly, if you enjoyed today's content, we implore you to make a contribution, large or small or ongoing, and we will accept checks too to help keep the content free. So, and there is information in the chat box about that. You can also do it at your member site for that. So thank you all for coming. Have a great night, everyone. Joshua, thank you so much, and hope to see you soon, and hope to see you in LA.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Really appreciate the opportunity, and thank you all for coming. I really, really appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Yep. Bye.